What up? This is Yinka Diz,
Peace, this is Outlaw.
and you're listening to the 80s Babies podcast.
And on today's episode, we've got a tribute / put you up, kind of, but more of a tribute for the debut album for the Dogg Pound entitled Dog Food. This one's released October 31st, 1995. And of course, the Dogg Pound, DPG, starring
Dogg Pound
Corrupt
Gangsta Crap.
Exactly. Starring Corrupt and Daz Dillinger.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is this a big one for you?
Not as big as it should be, but yeah.
Well, why should it be bigger? How about that?
So this is like an undisputed West Coast classic. Like if I asked any of my friends, they would say this album is a classic in the same way that, you know, I said Only Built for Cuban Links is a cult classic and you almost took my head off, right? Like all the homies that I grew up with would be upset if I tried to call this a cult classic. So, you know, this
being a classic for sure.
So this is a record that, you know, has is very near and dear to the hearts of most folks on the West Coast.
That makes sense.
I don't think that it's as near and dear to my heart as an album as it is to many other folks, which is funny because Corrupt as an artist is probably more near and dear to my heart than most other artists. And probably if I had to name an artist that influenced me as a rapper, Corrupt is probably in the top 5.
I
right?
can see that.
So, you know, so I mean, you know, it's interesting that this album is not as near and dear to my heart as it probably is to a lot of folks who would call this a classic.
Okay, well, like I said at the top, you know, this is / put you up for me because this is my first time listening to this album.
So why don't you tell us the Where Were Yous? You can do both at the same time.
Well, we just talked about the Where Were You Now. So my first time listening to this album was this past week. So yeah, if you care about the other things that I'm listening to, I could tell you, but really, I mean, you know, we're just listening to the Dogg Pound.
So let's talk about the Where Were You, I guess, when this was out.
You know, it's 1995. I don't remember when their hits were released. Let me actually take a look at that real quick.
New York was 95.
Okay, all right, so they were both 95. And the reason why I said I wasn't sure is because I know that this album got pushed back. I think it's released in October. It was supposed to be released in July, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Right. And so I remember New York from the radio. I vaguely remember the video.
Okay. Wow, vaguely.
Yeah. Well, because I got to watch music videos here and there. You know, this is 1995. I'm still in middle school.
Here's why I'm surprised, right? And I mean, this is probably all, you know, now in hindsight, but my expectation from a perspective of you is, one, we all know about that video. There's a lot of history around it. Biggie is involved in a lot of history around it with, you know, supposedly being accused as the reason why they had an issue with the West Coast when they tried to shoot the video. And then additionally, Biggie shot a St. Ides music video where he rapped over the beat to New York. And that's the reason.
Right.
I know you're drinking, but goddamn, what you drinking? No other beer feel better. I used to be a hustler, now I'm a 22 guzzler. Other beers, I'm not loving you. It's a great taste, it's less filling. I'd rather have some eyes and some guys in the crib chilling, or in the 6 relaxing, honeys in the back, cracking 6-packs, rubbing my back. Big Papa, you all right? That's what they whisper. Hey, mister, do you have the beer with the eye on the twister? He points to the freezer, me being the player. Big Papa showstopper, throw your hands in the air. From Bed-Stuy to Van Nuys, St. Eyes droop like leaves.
And that's the reason why I figured, you know, this would have more history for you prior to
I forgot that beat was, Dun it. Yeah. His flow on that was dope.
He killed that shit. He definitely killed that shit.
I think the reason why I said vaguely, it's not because I'm not familiar with the video. I just vaguely remember watching it at the time. Is the more correct term. So that's pretty much where I was. I wasn't really checking for, you know, I don't think this would have been on my radar. I think the things that were on my radar were like big stars. And if
like
you're on the
Snoop
West
Dogg.
Coast, Snoop Dogg is a big star. Dr. Dre, Tupac, big stars.
Right.
I think that Busta Rhymes, I'm not sure if he's a big star, but he's such a big personality that like he's become a star. And, you know, Fugees. Their songs were ubiquitous on the radio,
Yes.
On East Coast radio.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Thugs.
So Bone Thugs, exactly. Right.
Right,
Like these are like big names. And so I think that, Dogg Pound would have been one of those groups that, yeah, they had the occasional, hits on the radio. They were in the steady rotation, but they weren't being played like twice an hour.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I didn't have a reason to check for it then. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I wasn't a big hip hop head back in 1995,
Right.
even though that's all I listened to. I didn't really understand what the fuck I was listening to. It was really like I was just the radio was dictating what I listened to. It's pretty much it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, where were you?
Where was I? So I'll start with New York. I would say New York is kind of the beginning for me. It's 1995. I'm in my cousin Man's room. He's got this ginormous. Yeah, I'm a nigga, bro. I got a man in my family. I'm in my cousin Man's room on the south side of Chicago. He's got this huge Craig Mack poster that says Operation Funk the Planet on it or whatever. And he watches music videos. I very rarely am able to watch music videos at the crib. So it's normally when I'm around family, like my cousins, my big cousins and stuff, that I'm able to watch them. And I will never forget the first time I saw the New York video, and just, everything else that was on at the time. I remember the box was out, video music box where you could call in. And of course I couldn't call in because it cost $2.99 a minute or whatever. But, so because of like the box and stuff, right, you would see like the same 3 or 4 videos over and over and over again. And the videos we were watching at the time, other than Snoop Dogg or whatever was like super mainstream, was more local. So Do or Die, right? Yeah, so it was like Do or Die, Crucial Conflict. Crucial Conflict was kind of some Wild West Side niggas, so they were a little different. They had the whole barn and all that other stuff.
They're Midwest, right?
But they're Chicago. They're West Side of Chicago.
Oh, that's what I mean Chicago. I thought they were like Ohio. Okay.
No, they're from the West Side of Chicago.
Okay.
But Do or Die was kind of more like in the vein of their videos were more in the vein of what I was used to with this bad boy shit that I was, that type of flavor, right? So the stuff I was used to seeing in music videos was like, hot tubs and champagne bottles and,
sense.
Stuff like that. And Do or Die, they had Still Po Pimpin' and these records where, that was the type of stuff going on. And I remember watching, these videos that I was used to watching and seeing for the first time this cat kick, Snoop Dogg, which everybody knows Snoop Dogg. So I see Snoop Dogg and then he's kicking over the buildings in New York like Godzilla. And I just remember like just stopping everything that I was doing to watch this video because it was crazy. Like I guess this is kind of the beginnings of, you're kind of hearing like, there's the New York. We've heard of like kind of like Nas and Biggie, and these are names that I kind of know, but I don't really know because they're a little mainstream. But I mean, Biggie's huge mainstream now, but they're kind of mainstream, but they're not the biggest names. And then Death Row is like the biggest thing in the world, right? So like you got these West Coast cats, and so to have these West Coast people knocking over buildings in clearly New York, and I'm in the Midwest, was like, what? So that was crazy, right? And just seeing the video. And then from the minute I saw the video, I don't know if it was a world premiere or a Midwest world premiere, but from that point on, I just heard the song New York, New York over and over and over again. And I don't know if I had ever heard a single, like a single that was played on the radio where one guy rapped 3 verses and they were all lyrical verses, right? So, this dude's talking about like bubonic plague in his verse, and it's a song that's getting played on the radio. So, I mean, I think for me as a young, impressionable guy who didn't really know what like his own personal flavor of hip hop and music and tastes were going to be, I think it was very important and very influential, the moment where I interacted with New York. Okay. And not for all that East Coast versus West Coast shit, but just for like, Corrupt has 3 verses on this song and he's not the only person who raps, right? Like, And so just it was a big deal. It had Snoop Dogg on it, whatever. So that was my intro to it. I have like mad where were you? So sorry, I got like 3 more.
Well, yeah. Well, just tell me how this album grew with you.
So then, I moved to Cali, in 96. So, a year later, I get into West Side Connection, Bow Down and all that, which we talked about. I get into Tupac. One of the beds that would play on the radio all the time was What Would You Do by Tha Dogg Pound.
Okay.
And so similar to what you were talking about, like this was like a bed of music and an instrumental that I would hear in the background as the DJs who were on the radio would talk. So like, I didn't even know the song because I wasn't familiar with it before that. But I would hear the bed, hear the bed. And then one day I was listening to a Cali Caliente power mix, and What Would You Do, the song by Dogg Pound, is dropped in that joint. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. So then I become like a Dogg Pound fan, right? Okay. This album though, I still never really listened to this album in the way that I talked about kind of the Tupac album, where growing up, this album was always in the background. I go over Ken Dogg's house and we be playing GoldenEye or something, and this album is playing in the background. I go to some dude's crib and they're smoking weed, and there's girls coming in and out, and Dogg Pound Dog Food is playing in the background. Like it was an album that everybody I knew had, but I didn't have it, and I knew a lot of the songs just because they would be playing in the background in places.
This is an album, and we'll get into it more. And I don't want to take away from the quality of the album, but this is an album that would go really well as background music for just whatever.
Yes,
sure.
and imagine also like being on the West Coast and it being your background music, right? Like it really does talk a lot about and the lingo, the slang, the sound is a very California album. So being in California, like, and this is not to down it, it just is what it is, right? Like it's the perfect background soundtrack for being in a house, hanging out, doing whatever in California.
Look, I think that's a compliment. So
yeah, and so I never really sat down and made myself listen to this album until we said we were going to talk about it on the podcast. So
really,
I'm actually in the same boat as you. I've probably heard this a million times, but to sit down and actually make myself listen to it and say, oh, this is song number 5, this is song number 10. This was my first time doing that.
Okay, well, we're gonna get to that. Mm-hmm. Before we do, though, what's the critical reception? And I'm not really one to talk about this because none of my friends were talking about this album at all. Yeah. So all I had to do is go off of Wikipedia, and it looks like it's got like a B+, A-, give or take.
Yeah, I guess, maybe you won't kill me this time, but this time the homies will kill me. But, this is a cult classic. Like, this is, even despite what the people are saying in these, like I see one of them, Spin Magazine gave this a 5 out of 10. Cool. But like, the hood, the streets call this album a classic.
I mean, I think that it's fair to call this a West Coast classic without calling it a cult classic, right? The fact that West Coast music wasn't necessarily prominent like in New York, like that's not the fault of the Dogg Pound, especially because I think this is a really good album. Yeah,
and you can't tell the story of like G-Funk or really like West Coast rap without this album.
Yeah, but I mean, well, okay, so I can't speak to that. Obviously, you can. But I've listened to some of these other West Coast projects that you've encouraged me to listen to. We haven't always talked about it. Sometimes it's just like, hey, you should go listen to this. And I'm like, I'm not really feeling this. But like, this is one that I think is deserving of just being called a classic, period. So look, just because, we weren't really privy to it that much in where I was from. And that doesn't necessarily mean that people on the streets in the DMV area, because like I went to, a white high school, you know what I mean? And so like, even though my friends were black, like we're still like very, very, very much like the minority in a white high school, white public school. Yeah. And so it's just like, they weren't really,
I'm kind of surprised they weren't on this, and here's why, right? So,
what I was going to say real quick is that I think other parts of the DMV were. So I think that if you get into like Alexandria, right? Like I think if you get into the parts of the DMV area, the parts of DC, Virginia, and Maryland that are more, I guess, quote unquote, hood or street, that don't give a fuck about the cats in New York, that care much more about UGK. They care much more about Scarface. Love Scarface, yes. Right? Love Go-Go. Love Northeast Groovers and Backyard Band and R.E. And love Tupac. Definitely prefer Tupac over Biggie. I think that crowd was probably more in tune with this album.
Right.
That's a crowd that cared about artists like Do or Die. Cared about artists like, I don't know about Twista, but definitely Do or Die. Ball and G. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that crowd, I'd be interested to hear their take. Unfortunately, I can't offer that take, but I suspect that crowd was probably fucking with this album because it's a good album.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just as a kid that was, you know, because of the fact that, so, you know, the next year I would move to California and then I was kind of back and forth. We moved to the suburbs. We still had family in, you know, Cabrini and, you know, like, I feel like I got exposure to like a lot of different environments. And I remember seeing white kids with this album. And I feel like, you know, in the way that, you know, Snoop Dogg was almost kind of rebellious, like, oh, my mom and dad are going to be so mad that I have this album, right? Like, it's like he's chasing tail on the you know, the cover of the album. I feel like Bone Thugs and this were the two other albums that I would see white kids walking around with, because it was like, it almost gave them like cred, like, ooh, you know, I'm listening to something that I know I'm not supposed to be listening to.
Okay.
So that's just my experience. I don't know. I don't know if that's, you know, everybody's experience. That was just kind of what I remember seeing as a kid.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that, but I mean, you know, I'm not gonna challenge it.
Yeah.
So, but critical reception. So this is definitely a West Coast classic. Definitely a classic for the streets. Okay, so should we get into the highlights and lowlights?
Yeah, let's get to it. I'd be interested to hear your highlights.
Yeah, so I will say, first of all, I think this is a good album. And yeah, let me just get into it. So I think that, you know, obviously Corrupt as an MC is a highlight on here.
Yep.
He's, you know, Corrupt is a spitter, and he's spitting on here, but like he also sounds good. And like I acknowledge that Corrupt is a very, very good MC, but I don't always hear it sometimes too. Like it's one of those things where it's like, I know you're good, but like I'll hear you in a song and I'm like, eh. But like that's not the case on this album. Like dude is spitting for real. Yeah. So Corrupt as an MC is definitely a highlight. Daz as a producer is a highlight. And as a complimentary vocalist is also a highlight. Look, this is a legit hip hop duo. You know, this is a duo where you obviously have your front man, you know, your star, and that your lyrical star, and that is Corrupt. But like you still need a number two that is strong and can hold his own and can complement you. You know what I mean? Like all the best duos have that, and Daz is that on this. And the reason why I have to emphasize that is because I don't always fuck with Daz as a vocalist. A lot of times I think he's whack. Period. You know what I mean? I'm just like, like I have an appreciation for him. But like the dude's not nice. But like, nah, like he works on this. He's good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
agreed.
But Daz as a producer as well. And I had to highlight this because this is while Dre is still with Death Row. And so the fact that, you know, Daz produces all but, or at least is credited with all but 2 tracks on this is kind of dope. It kind of speaks to just how talented Death Row was.
For sure.
You know what I mean? But the other thing I have to say, one of the biggest highlights for me is Dogg Pound just as a collective. It's very clear that they are like, they sound like Snoop's background group, but they also don't need Snoop on every single track. Like, this isn't a case where it's like a Junior Mafia album, and unless Biggie's on the track, it's whack. It's like, no, like, you know, Snoop is there and it works, but like he doesn't outshine any of the other two.
Agreed.
They're dope without him. Like they, you know, you know, sometimes some of these, you know, these collective hip hop groups are considered like the entourage, right? Where like the main artist comes up and then they bring in their crew behind them. A lot of times those artists are not good, but like that's not the case here. They deserve, like, even if Snoop was never a thing, it's very clear to me that they deserve to have a place in hip hop, right? Especially with this album.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that's a highlight for me, and the reason why that point matters is because I don't want to talk too much about these albums, because we're probably going to do separate episodes on them. But like, you have asked me to listen to Corruption and Streets Is a Mother. And I've listened to those albums at least once, and I remember being not really feeling them. But like, that's not the case here. I was actually a little apprehensive about listening to this album, and I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh, this is way better than Corrupt solo project. So we don't have to go dig too deep into that rabbit hole, because to be honest, I'm not even really prepared to have that discussion. You can offer some talking points if you want to, but either way, in terms of just like general highlights, those are the highlights for me.
I think it's interesting that you say that, you know, just to expound, like I think, you know, I think that speaks to how well Daz, you know, compliments Corrupt, you know, as a lyricist, and as a, you know, as a group member, you know, in addition to his production, because like you said, like I disagree with you about those albums, and we can
I'm sure you do.
Talk about them. But you know, the way they complement each other, it's interesting because, you know, I'll go back to New York, right? Like, Corrupt has fucking 3 verses on a radio single, right? Like, and he's talking about bubonic plague on his shit, right? Like, it's like it wouldn't work unless the production, you know, the hooks and everything else that's happening around it works, right? Like we talked about it on the Game episode, right? Like, you got a guy that just wants to rap for 100 bars or 300 bars, like that's cool, but like, you know, it doesn't work unless the other pieces around it work.
Yeah.
And and I think, you know, that's just a testament to Daz as, you know, I guess I'll call him a co-executive producer. I guess Dre was kind of the executive producer here too. But, you know, somebody who was providing these soundtracks and providing the complement to Corrupt, who, as you said, is clearly the like standout or lead lyrical talent on the project. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to add is, it's funny that he's kind of in this like this Dogg Pound collective, right? Because, you know, they come from an environment where Snoop Dogg is this guy who's known to be this great freestyler, you know, and so Dre gets on, and, you know, his brother, you know, Warren G is telling him, yo, I'm in a group with this guy Snoop. He's great. You should hear him. He hears Snoop. Snoop gets signed. Snoop becomes a part of what Dr. Dre's doing. Well, similarly, you know, Corrupt is this guy that's, you know, in LA tearing everybody up in battles, and they're like, oh, there's this guy that might be as good at freestyling as you. So it's actually kind of dope that like Snoop kind of stays out of his way, and he's able to be a complimentary piece to Snoop, and Snoop's able to be a complimentary piece to him on this album. Like it's dope that it worked, because in a lot of cases, and you know this, man, like when people that rap, like, a lot of times it doesn't work. Like, you can't have 2 alpha dogs. You can't have like a guy like there's a Notorious, or, you know, I guess similar to this whole like DMX and Jay-Z battle that everybody talks about, but there's supposedly no video, or maybe there's a video, but we don't know. Like there's a Corrupt and Snoop Dogg battle that's famous in LA lore, where the 2 of them battled in a club. And that was how, you know, they became cool with each other, had respect for each other, and Corrupt, you know, kind of becomes down. So it was just dope that they're able to work together in concert the way they were on this album.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with Snoop, just because Snoop has never really seemed like too competitive when it comes to sharing the spotlight. And I think that has to do with the fact that Snoop is just such a secure individual with who he is, and like what he brings to a song, and what he brings to hip hop. Like, there's no replace. Exactly.
Ever.
So knowing that, having full confidence in that, he's like, well, you can shine too, because I'm Snoop. I'm always gonna shine.
Right.
You know what I mean? So okay. The only other highlight I want to just briefly mention are the skits. They're really good. In fact, I think, you know, an album has a good skits when you make sure you need to listen to the entire song, just in case you get some more of that. If you're licking, that's W Bones.
Ricky Harris, man, he's that dude, yo.
The skits are definitely a highlight for me. So, should we get into some track for track highlights?
Yeah, let's do it.
Look, right off the bat, Dogg Pound Gangsters. Just like what a well mixed song. Just good energy, good West Coast vibe. Like I fucks with it.
Yeah.
You know?
I love how Corrupt comes in. Like his first line is, what does he say?
Now my rhymes are as potent as pipe bombs. It takes time to concoct rhymes like mines, like landmines. All set to explode. Microphone is all set to unload. Zone watch, that means watch the zone. I'm in a temple with 1 million dead MC microphones, and they all want it back by the peeps. Sleep if you dare, cause death catch niggas when they sleep. Beware of the consequences, it's senseless to face a prosecuted life, but death and C sentence.
I'm explosive like pipe bombs or something. Like his first bar is like, dog, I'm gonna tear you all up. This is what I do. And I like that about the album.
Look, it's a hard track that's also just a good song musically. And I think it does a good job of showcasing the two of them. And yeah, like I like that as a I guess, you know, there's the intro, but the intro is only like 18 seconds, which is also cool. You know what I mean? But it pretty much just goes right into it. So I like that. Mm-hmm. I like Respect. I'm not going to call it a highlight, but I definitely liked it. Did you want to discuss that as a highlight or no?
It's not a highlight for me. It's just cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, is New York a highlight for you?
Yes.
So here's the deal.
Okay.
It's actually not a highlight for me.
Okay.
And the reason why is not because I don't like the song. It's not because I don't love the beat. It's because, like, is this supposed to be a diss track?
No, I mean, they made the track before it. The video is a diss, but
the video is a diss, but like the song is
not.
And I think that's the reason why it's not a highlight. Because like I'm listening to this and I'm like, oh, he's just spitting. He's not even talking shit.
Speaking of disses, though, we did skip the fact that
they dissed
Bone Thug catches a stray in the first one.
I don't love no hoes in harmony.
Yeah, damn.
I caught that. Yeah. So that's the only reason why this track is not a highlight.
That's weird though. Like, why does it have to be a diss?
No, just because because I'm like, oh, New York is on this. You know what I mean? Like, let me actually pay attention to the song. Like, I know how famous the song is, and I'm like, oh, he's not even talking shit. Like,
they said they made the song to big up New York, and the only reason they did that video was because they went to shoot the video, and Big sent motherfuckers to shoot at him at the video shoot.
Oh, is that what happened? Yeah. Really?
I thought we talked about this on a podcast.
Shit.
So the story is, or supposedly, you know, Panama, correct me if I'm wrong. He usually knows when I'm wrong. But so they recorded the song. Snoop came last and was like, oh, yo, I could use this Melly Mel hook. So he does the Melly Mel hook, New York, big city of dreams. And they're like, yo, we can fly out to New York and shoot it to show New York that we fuck with them. Like, yo, like, you know, it'll be like some East Coast, West Coast together type shit.
Right.
So they fly out to New York to shoot the video, and they shoot it in a random hood in Brooklyn. And for whatever reason, Biggie gets a call like, hey, yo, it's some niggas from Cali shooting a video like in a hood in Brooklyn. So Biggie has a radio interview that day or at the time or something. I guess he finds out like as he's going up to the radio or something. So he gets on the radio and is basically like, yo, these niggas is out here trying to, you know, act like they run us, whatever. You know, this is where they at. Y'all should go see them.
Come on, so Biggie, you gotta do better than that. Right. That being said, though, there is something to be said when you're a visitor, you let people know you're visiting.
That's what they say. That's what they say. I don't know. I don't know that. Like, was Biggie the guy they needed to check in with?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm sure knowing so. Look, Snoop. I'm sure knowing Snoop, point, he knew somebody.
Yo, at that point, he was the king of New York, though.
Yeah, that's fair.
Even in '95, he was the king of New York.
Yeah.
So
Biggie it says this on the radio. Okay. Random, supposedly, again, Puff and Big never take credit for the shit that they actually do. I'm sorry. But supposedly he said that and just left it like that. And random dudes from Brooklyn decide to run up, on their video shoot, spray the joint up. They're in their trailer. Nice. They're sitting in their trailer. Nice. And all of a sudden gunfire, erupts into their trailer. And so, they end up, going back to California and
Biggie
then
got
being
pulled like Donald Trump.
Apparently. And apparently, or supposedly as the story would go, they were like, yo, motherfuck them motherfucking New York niggas. We about to come out with our video and let them know how we feel about them. And then it became a diss. So the video is a diss, but the song is not a diss. That's all.
Got you. Okay. Yeah. All right.
But great song. I think one thing to point out about it, though, in addition, is that DJ Pooh made this beat.
Yeah.
And that's just interesting from the perspective of the fact that he only produced 2 things on here. Daz did the whole rest of it. And this is one of the few, to me, songs that's like what I'll call like a nuclear song. And I think that's another reason why it's a highlight for me, right? Like, there's very few songs that have actual song structure to them on this album. Okay. So, like, you know, verse, hook. You know, hook that's a very catchy hook that you know it's the hook. Like, New York has that, and many of the other songs on this album do not.
I got you. Okay.
But anyway.
All right, so my next highlight is Psycho Like No. So I love that hook. I don't know where else I've heard it. I know I've heard it before. Help me out. What else? What other song is this on?
There's a Psycho Like No 2, and they say that hook somewhere else in another. It's song. In Change the Game. The Jay-Z joint. Change the game for these.
Oh, is that where? It is. Okay.
Like no bitches. Yeah, that's where you know.
Okay. That's such a good song. I love that song.
It is. It really is.
So
that's a West Coast New York song.
That's the reason why. That's one of the reasons why I like the song so much. The other thing too is that I love. I think it's Snoop who's doing the hook, right? I love it, like the little ad lib at the end, or the little part in the end where he's just like murderer. You murderer. Like, for whatever reason, I don't know. It's just a good groove. Like, I don't have much else to say about it other than like the song is just a highlight for me.
Yeah, no, it's a highlight for me too. But I think that though, I do like those little breadcrumbs, and the fact that Psycho Like No hook comes back up multiple times in hip hop history makes me like the song more.
For sure. So the next highlight for me is Riding, Slipping, and Sliding. And man, this is just a good groove.
Yeah, it is.
It's just a good groove. I don't have much else to say about it other than I was like, yo, like I'm in a vibe right now. Like I'm feeling this joint.
Yeah. You right on my my highlights.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to skip one or skip a few. And my next highlight is I Don't Like to Dream About Getting Paid. Okay. And the reason why this is a highlight for me is because I really just like the concept of this song.
Yeah, fact.
Now, I'm not sure how true to life this scenario actually is about the person who's trying to, you know, play it straight, get an actual job, and then they fall back into, you know, the woes of the street life or whatever, right? Like, I'm not sure how true to life that is. I've never lived it, so I don't know. That being said, though, I think it is a rather unique perspective for a song. You don't hear about it enough. Yeah. And the fact that it comes from this group, you know, like we talked about this before when we talked about West Side Connection, which I think this album is a much better album than that West Side Connection album. Right? Oh, wow. But nevertheless, that album, there's a lot of bravado. And you would never hear a song like this on that album because they're just talking shit. And I think that when you know about like who Dogg Pound is, but you don't really know their catalog, but you kind of know who they are, like I do. This is not a song that I would expect from them, especially when Daz Dillinger is the one who's like the feature, like the main highlight on it. Yeah. So because of that, I'm like, wow, that's surprising. This song's kind of dope.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. You know, we talked about how we feel as though, you know, you can't really make it real without giving the other side of the coin, right? Like, you can't just celebrate, oh, I'm a gangster. It's like, all right, cool. Like, what does that really mean? And I think this, you know, to me is that what makes it a highlight is that subject matter that really just gives you the other side of the coin of like, I'm partially a product of my environment, and this is kind of the alternative where I would have tried to do X, Y, and Z, but it's just not really an option for me.
Yeah, so I think it's an important song, and like as a real piece of music, like it's good. It's necessary. I think it's refreshing as well.
When I listened again to this album, this song actually reminded me of the Little Fires Everywhere scene where she says like, you had good options. Because it's just like, yo, like I didn't have any options. Like I tried to do all this other shit and it didn't work, and this is why. So, yeah.
I feel you. So the next highlight for me is "Do What I Feel," and it's a good groove, but more so than that, like Corrupt just shines on these joints.
I love this song.
Corrupt
so
is a
much.
beast, man.
Yeah, this is probably my second favorite song on this whole album.
Look, I feel you.
Yeah,
joint's dope. Yeah. I don't have much else. I don't have much else to say other than it's just a dope track.
One thing I want to add is Lady of Rage after Afro Puffs. She's kind of like an Easter egg. Like she just kind of pops up on shit and then you just fucking never see her again for 5 years. So I'm happy that we have a Lady of Rage feature on this.
Okay. The next highlight for me, and I love this song, is "If We All Fuck." This shit is so dope to me. Look, it's a simple groove, right? It's short and to the point. Yeah. It's just your bros on the mic talk about getting some pussy, right? Like that's all it is. Just talking about getting bitches. Like, look, problematic, misogynistic, whatever, but like it's just short and to the point. Like it's not a long track. It's it's like, yo, this is what we're gonna do. We just gonna get on the mic and spit this shit and like yo, this shit just works. Like I fuck with this track, yo.
Nah, I actually love it as well. And not to spoil the thunder, but one of my highlights, my overarching highlights, was the run that takes you from New York, all the way through Some Bomb Ass.
Yeah.
And so every single song that you're talking about is in that run. I think that's a great run, personally.
No, it is a good run. It's a very good run. And I skipped one, and I'm sure we're gonna go back to it when we do your highlights. But yeah. And so the other thing I love about this track is the outro. He's just on the phone with some chick talking about like, oh, how many girls you got with you? Oh, it's 5. Yeah, how many hoes? Like, oh, 5. It's like, oh, well, we just going to the freeway now. It's like, y'all fucking taking too long. It's Corrupt there, it's Snip there, whatever. And then it goes into the next track. Girl, you got some bomb ass pussy. You got some bomb ass pussy. Yo, this is this whole sequence, including this song, Some Bomb Ass, like it's just a highlight. It's just fire, yo.
It's so weird because I called it a meh light, right?
Really?
Not the song. This song is in my highlight run. But the kind of sophomoric misogyny of this album.
That's fair.
Because it's obviously sophomoric and misogynistic, but then you can't have this album without it. And these two songs back to back just really fucking work. Like they're great songs.
Yes, they do. They absolutely do. So, and the thing is that like I've heard that phrase before said that way, like you got some bomb ass pussy. I didn't realize it came from this album. So I'm assuming it comes from this album. I'm assuming that this song didn't take from something else. That like any other reference or any other time that like that phrase is uttered in that way is taken from this song. I'm assuming so.
Probably.
So anyway, that was just a highlight for me. And that's the last of the highlights for me in terms of the individual tracks. But I know I skipped one that I'm sure you might want to talk about.
Are you talking about Big Pimpin'?
Well, I'm talking about Let's Play House.
Oh man, Let's Play House it has to be a highlight. And it's not even a personal highlight, right? It's just a fucking West Coast classic. Like
I got you.
I mean, come on, man. Like what? I don't even know what else to say about it. It is what it is. So it's the ain't no fun of this album.
That's fair. So here's what I wrote in my notes.
Okay.
I said I actually don't like this song musically, but I can see this song growing on me in high school and growing up to see it as a classic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like listening to it now, I'm like, there's actual musical things that really fucking. Like, first of all, Michelet is horrible on
She's not good on here. You're right.
She sounds bad, right?
She sounds bad.
And like, it's goofy, it's sophomoric. Here's what I will say though. I don't mind this song. It's just not a highlight. But that being said, this song that's been stuck in my head as I've been just like roaming around the house is it Dad? Because it's not Nate. It's Daz Dillinger singing, right?
It says, you be the mama and I be the daddy. Are you talking about the
who's actually singing Let's Play House? That's Nate?
Yeah, that's Nate.
That is Nate. All right. That hook has been like stuck in my head. And it's not bad. It's just the song is not a highlight for me. But that being said, I understand that this song is a highlight. It's just not a highlight for me personally.
There's a lot of little catchy bits and the just the melody and then it's just I don't know, man. It works. I think you're right. Michelet sounds bad.
Yo, Michelet sounds horrible.
Yeah,
horrible. So, and the thing is like, I was listening to this song and I was like, oh, I know that this is like, I could just tell, like, listening to the song, like, this is like one of the classic tunes from the album. I'm just not really fucking with it. I don't mind it. I don't hate it.
And it's also one of the songs similar to the New York that's more nuclear, right? Like it sounds like an actual song as opposed to just two niggas that are just smoking weed and having a conversation, which most of the songs on this album sound like.
Right. And, I think this was their second single, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
Or second or first.
Yeah, second
check the Wikipedia. Yeah, Wikipedia. Yeah. So, okay. So that's it for my highlights. Do you have any other highlights?
So Big Pimpin' is in that run. And it's a highlight from that perspective. I really like the production on Big Pimpin'.
I like the good production.
And I like the brevity, right? Like it is real brief. They say what they gotta say. Like, who is the dude? It's Ricky Ricky Harris?
Is it?
It's like one of the not W balls, but like one of the radio announcers is talking on it. The beat is just super smooth and pimptastic.
It says Delamond Williams, so whoever Delamond Williams is, that's not Daz, is it?
I think that might be that's the dude that one of the dudes that does the radio shit. No, Delmar Arnaud is Daz.
Yeah, so Delamond Williams is the writer on Big Pimpin' 2, and I do think that like as a bit of street pimpin' poetry, like it works.
Yeah, no, I really like it. It's like a highlight for me.
I got you.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last one I'll say, and it's not even really a highlight, but it needs to be highlighted, is Reality.
Okay.
And the only reason I'm highlighting it is because similar to what we said about I Don't Like to Dream About Getting Paid, like, Reality is one of the records that talk about the flip side of the coin, right? It's like, it's the story of like growing up in a gang, in a gang land, in gang territory, and like the fact that like that is your reality. There's no way to hide from it. You can't walk around it. You can't pretend. And I think we talked about this a little bit on the episode with Panama, where we talked about protest music, and I've had many conversations with friends, but you watch Fox News or you hear these places and they're like, why are these terrible hoodlums gangbangers? And it's just like, not understanding or not trying to understand the reality of the environment and how you can be a product of your environment. Because at the end of the day, when you wake up, I mean, there are kids that live in a blood neighborhood and go to school in a Crip neighborhood. Like, these are things where it's like at a very just survival is one of your very basic instincts, and just at a very basic survival level they have to engage with these very real situations, and I think that Reality is important for that from that perspective.
I think that's a good point. That's a much better analysis than I would have been able to offer, because if we're going to get into the lowlights, is that cool?
Yeah, go for it.
I think that the last three songs on the album are kind of a collective low light for me.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because although I think you make good points about the song Reality, it's also 6 minutes and 16 seconds.
Yeah.
Followed by another track, it's 5:09.
Yeah.
Followed by another track that's 5 minutes and 44 seconds.
Right.
And they all kind of have like a similar musical tone to it.
Yep.
Kind of like it's West Coast, but it's really laid back, and like I think it's like the emphasis on like the weed smoking aspect. And I think that like by the time I'm listening to this album and I'm getting to these songs like back to back to back, collectively I'm just like, I'm kind of tired. Like I'm kind of like over this sound that I'm hearing, and it kind of takes me out of the album a little bit.
I definitely agree with you. And one of my overarching lowlights is just song length in general. But I do think that those last three songs, it really, after Some Bomb Ass, I'm kind of like,
Well,
like
Dog's Day Afternoon, what's his face? Corrupt is on there with some energy, but like it's a quick song. It's like 2 minutes and 46 seconds.
Exactly. But I think from there, like I kind of start to lose the energy that I had in that run that I was telling you about.
I think that Reality might have done better, maybe higher up on the album, but like. Just where it's placed, like by this point, I'm kind of like losing momentum for it. But I mean, that being said, I don't think they're bad songs. It's just kind of a low light.
Yep.
And they don't deter from the fact that I think that this is a really good album. And in terms of the people who say this is a classic, you're not going to get any challenges from me. This shit is dope. I was very surprised by this album, so I have to give it 2 thumbs up here.
Okay. I think the album itself is too long, and that's
fair.
part of why, but like you said, it does start to drag at the very end. And I'm more highlighting, when I talk the highlights, the subject matter in reality than the way it was executed.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I will say, I think that with albums like this that came out, particularly these ones that came out in the 90s, where you could tell that they cared about the musicality of the product they were putting out.
Yeah.
Where audiences were actually, one, we had the attention span to sit with these albums for a while, but we're also kind of encouraged to sit with these albums for a while, right? Like, it's not like today's artists or a lot of today's artists where, they have 1 or 2 hits and then they're literally just like pumping out tunes to fill out the rest. It's like, no, it's like, okay, back then they had a couple of hits because they needed to get some radio play, but like the real things that the artists want to say is in the rest of like the meat of the album, right? And I think that there's a lot of albums like this that like this from that time period, and I think that given albums like that, I think that it's not necessarily uncommon for even some of the really good ones to have really, really good track runs. And then they have some other songs near the end that kind of like trail off. I mean, we talked about Equimini, right? Yeah. That's one of them. One of the greatest 10-track runs ever across any genre of music.
Yep.
And then some songs that aren't all that great. Does it negate the greatness of the album? No. And I think that while you're correct, the time length on this album probably is too long.
Yeah.
Particularly the choice to put 3 tracks that were, 5 minutes plus back to back to back that all kind of had the same energy.
Yeah.
I think is a bad decision. But like, whatever. Like the meat of the album is still there. These songs don't take away from that. So, it doesn't take away from the fact that this album is really good.
Yeah. If I could do one thing that would be the easiest thing that I could do that would make this a better album, I would put What Would You Do as a bonus track.
Okay, that's fair.
You've heard What Would You Do, right?
Whatever. I would need to listen to it to remember it.
Yeah, oh my God. It was originally, I think it was on the Murder Was the Case soundtrack. And then it was again on the Natural Born Killers soundtrack. But yeah.
All right, hold on, let me look this up real quick and then I'll edit this in. Yeah. So I hadn't listened to this, but upon listening to it now, I can see why you would like it. Yeah,
Your Outlaw just played the song. I just lost it again.
Yeah. Like I actually had not heard the song, but I'm listening to it now. This shit is dope.
Oh man, every time I hear it, it just puts me back, in that mind frame. But if that was a bonus track on here, like I feel like,
why not just make it a track and take out some of the other ones at the end?
Well, it did come out in '94, and it had been on 2 soundtracks prior to it being on here. So this would have been the 3rd album it would have been on. That's
fair. Okay. Yeah. Who's the producer on that?
I want to say it's Daz.
Man, Daz, you know what?
Daz is a very underrated producer.
Look, I know that you said that Eric Sermon is like your most underrated producer of all time, but I almost think Daz should be on that list.
Yeah,
because I think
definitely on the list.
I think that, in terms of West Coast fans, they probably have a really good appreciation for Daz, but Daz is fucking nasty.
He really
You know what I mean? And I really wonder if, look, Dr. Dre is great. He's one of the greatest producers of all time. He's in my elite tier of producers. Mm-hmm. But if he wasn't an asshole about some of his executive producer decisions and producer credit decisions, and the need to, we talked about how Snoop wasn't competitive with his spotlight. I'm not sure if that's the same thing with Dr. Dre. I think that based off of some of the things that I've seen from Dr. Dre, the fact that he's, just taking credit for some things, I get the impression that he is competitive when it comes to those things. And I think that maybe if he weren't that competitive, Daz would have had much more of a push. You know what I mean? Because the dude is nasty. Like,
I wonder
I think my favorite track or one of my favorite tracks on All Eyes on Me is Ambitious as a Writer.
Oh,
that shit fucking goes hard. And that is so Daz. That shit is just crazy.
Yeah. I think, it would be interesting, and I'm sure, it'll never happen, but it would be interesting to hear like his take on it, because I feel like to some degree, at least if the stories are true, some of that was Suge saying, we can make more money from this song by saying that it was produced by Dr. Dre, right? And then some of it, of course, was Dr. Dre taking credit for somebody else's work.
Whatever. Dr. Dre had enough pull, though, that if he wanted to, he would have been like, nah, like, we can get even more money if there's 2 super producers in Death Row. But Dr. Dre chose not to do that shit. Yeah. Because when I think about Death Row, I don't think about any other producers. Yeah. I think about Dr. Dre. And if there were other producers on there, they didn't highlight that enough. And Daz, sadly, like, I feel like if it wasn't for the fact that his beats are so good, or that he has so many good beats just on his own, like, he could have gotten kind of lost in the sauce a little bit. You know what I mean?
And actually, speaking of that, something we didn't talk about, Superfly actually plays the keys on a lot of the records on this album.
Oh, okay.
And I think when we talk about underrated producers, Superfly is definitely on my list of most underrated producers, at least from the West Coast.
I got you. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily have anything else to add to this. Like I said, if I had more personal anecdotes, I would provide them, but I don't have them. So unless you have any other personal anecdotes that you would like to provide for our listeners.
Nah, man. This is an excellent album. It's definitely a time capsule, and took me back to 95, because I feel like for whatever reason. And so, for folks that haven't heard this joint, definitely go back and give it a listen.
Yeah. So I think that should do it. Peace.
We doing it like that. Motherfuckers out there be like taking our style, trying to do their own little this thing. Can't do it, So we gon' do it like this. Like, sit back, relax, and get cool.
Have you ever heard of a slaughter? I oughta start dipping, sipping on that ST gets me to tripping. I don't slips, I bangs with that mad ass Dogg Pound gang. It's a DPG thing. Corrupt from the SC. You wanna test me? Let's see if you'll survive 45 times. Like a hollow point headed for your dome. Take a couple steps, turn around in its own. Couldn't withstand the murderous mental. I subdue and then take 2 to your temple. When I cause holocaust from what's written, niggas collapsing when the straps is spitting. Look, this is how it's done, nigga. 1, 2, 3. I grab my strap, your best run, nigga. I give the fuck, corrupts the kingpin of the clique. Little is G with the biggest dick.
Shit, a motherfucker better recognize. With the twist of my wrist like OJ, you won't die. I snack on motherfuckers like a bone. Wanna be the shit upon the microphone ever since I was born. Not to ever love a bitch. Learn game after game. That's why we are the best. Motherfuckers be gangster styles minute after minute. But soon as you did it, I smelt the nigga shit. Now what would you do if you could fuck with me or my crew?
But you can't, so don't even think about stepping in the motherfucking hell.
What would you do if you could fuck with me or my crew?
But you can't, so don't even think about stepping in the motherfucking hell.
Bitches butterfly all day while I steady make my pay every single day in the LBC. Cruising through the east side, me and Lil Style in the back of a green 6-4 bustin' freestyle.
There's no escape, give me the papes in the tape case. How much money could a nigga make in one place? The review ain't shit new. You stupid motherfuckers can't fuck with my crew.
I see all these niggas trying to get with my kinfolk. Get so many busters on the West Coast, and none to say the least. I see a few trick ass niggas laying low on the East Coast. And the question is asked, do you wanna rap, scrap, or blast? Cause that nigga Daz, I'll be the first one to hit him. Oh yeah, fuck BG knockout and every nigga down with him. Cause I'm a natural born killer, and I still a hat. Motherfucker, cause it's like that. Now what would you do? If you could fuck with me or my crew?
It's so many motherfuckers that I can include. Who's quick to blast motherfuckers in a feud? It doesn't make a difference, cause it's about who's the quickest on the draw to end all existence. For instance, let's take these ruthless fools in a pound in one room. Assume it's only for conversation, so let's conversate. Slip a nigga to 38, then dip. Empty out the clip, mind on set trip, cause niggas talk shit.
Now if a nigga had a prayer before a nigga died, would the nigga be dead or would he stay alive? And if I was in your shoes, would I survive? Probably not, you probably let your Glock go pop. Now drop to your knees and picture that nigga Daz flowing in the breeze.
Now what would you do if you could fuck with me or my crew?
But you can't, so don't even think about stepping in the motherfucking house.
What would you do if you could fuck with me or my crew?
But you can't, so don't even think about stepping in my motherfucking house, bitch.
From the twitch of the eyes, you can see the lie. Just know it when you see it, cause it messes up the flow to the real feelings, you know. And I'd rather be sipping on a glass of wine. Can you feel yourself in the ring with Everlast, trying to still a flow? I don't think so. Cock blockers come with their hearts beating jealousy, in the way like a stray dog, trying to claim every bitch as his own. Cock blockers come in every color, even blue, yeah, this is true. Trying to fuck your woman and even you. Now what the fuck would you do, motherfucker?